Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. You know my story. I'm a recovering political hack. I'm a recovering lawyer. I spent years working in politics, including as a speechwriter with stints in the Clinton White House and for a California governor. Spent years also practicing law. And, 10 years ago, I discovered this medium of podcasting. And I've been doing it ever since because I get to talk to smart people every week. And today's guest is no exception. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses with the strategy and production they need to create a podcast and content marketing that produces tremendous ROI. And my guest today, before I introduce them, I want to give a quick shout out to Michael Roderick of Small Pond Enterprises. Michael's been a friend for a long time. He originally introduced me to today's guest and reintroduced me when he had this new book coming out, which I'm excited to dive in to with him. So Michael Schein, he is the founder and president of MicroFame Media, a marketing agency that specializes in making idea-based companies famous in their fields. He works with clients such as eBay, Magento, the Medici Group, University of Pennsylvania, Gordon College, University of California, Irvine, LinkedIn, and many, many more. He's also written for Fortune, Forbes, Psychology Today, and a bunch of different places. The name of his new book is The Hype Handbook, 12 Indispensable Success Secrets from the World's Greatest Propagandists, Self-Promoters, Cult Leaders, Mischief Makers, and Boundary Breakers. I think that's my favorite book title of the year for sure.
Thank you.
Quite,
it's like
quite
Borat
a mouthful.
with the long. Yeah. You're the Borat subtitles are always long. I wanted to pay homage to that, maybe.
I think, I'm sure. I love the Borat movie. The second one was great. I think you probably need 2 volumes just to fit all those words on the cover of the book. But
yeah, I know. It's you got to put it all out there.
It's great. So, you're in New York, which we were joking beforehand is kind of like. What better place to judge hype from than one of the most hyped places in the world? Legitimately so. One of the best cities in the world. I love New York. You've been for many years helping to engineer fame for many of your clients. So what inspired this idea of writing a book about a handbook? Why give away the secrets?
So there are a couple of things here. I mean, one is what gave me the idea, and the second part is why give away the secrets. And they're interrelated, but they're actually different. And the difference is important because, I never thought I would own a business. I had no desire to own an agency. I wanted to do something kind of artsy. I always thought of myself as a writer. And I still think of myself as a writer, even though I try to do some writing every day, no matter what, but there are plenty of things I do besides writing, but I still think of myself that way. And after having fallen into a corporate job at a certain point, I learned a lot for the first 3-4 years there because I was kind of a naive kid when I went in, and I was a professional by the end of 3 or 4 years, but I was there for 8 years because I was scared to leave, and I was really, really unhappy, at the end. And so I finally got up the courage to leave, and I figured that I would. I saw an opportunity to write what's called demand gen content. It's a certain type of copywriting that I had read about, writing white papers and things, and I figured because I write well, and I've always been told I write well, that I would just get a lot of jobs, And it turned out I did not. And I almost blew through all of my savings, and it was very, very scary. And I read every sales and marketing book that's out there. And I certainly learned a lot, but it didn't help me at all in terms of generating new business. And then I thought back to my past when I was really interested in what I call benevolent mischief, sort of bending the rules, but not hurting anybody. Not even bending the rules, kind of raising a ruckus, getting people entertained, hyping things up.
Yeah.
But good things. And I used to play in bands, and we had a real product. Whether it was a good product, I don't know, probably not. But people seemed to enjoy it. But we would use hype. We would put signs around New York that said Dave Matthews Must Die. He was popular at the time, and get people all worked up, and they'd come check it out, whatever. So I thought to myself, well, all of the people that I stole those ideas from, like the Sex Pistols manager and, just these mischief makers, they didn't think of themselves as marketers, and either do cult leaders, either do propagandists, but no one gets people more energized, attracts more attention than these unconventional marketers. So I thought to myself, okay, I didn't leave my job to become a con artist, so I don't want to hurt anybody or lie to anybody. But are there mass psychology principles at play here that we could use in an ethical way? So I started experimenting with it. And I was just so much more effective when I started using that playful point of view rather than trying to figure out what the newest marketing technology or the newest sales funnel structure was. And so, yeah, I that led to a career. I mean, first my writing career started to do well, and then it turned into an agency. The reason I decided to write the book, though, was a little bit different. I guess it really bugged me that a lot of people who are not very nice people and who I think do a lot of harm in the world understand a lot of these strategies very intuitively and use them to push garbage on people. And the people who are promoting good things that I find valuable, have this sort of, either they don't get it intuitively, but even worse, they feel that it's kind of beneath them to look at the world the way it really is and admit that human psychology is what it is.
You hear people say that a lot. I don't want to do marketing.
I don't want to do promotion, push my. Yeah. And so I guess I wanted, for various reasons, things I see in the news, wrong directions that I think we're going based on people pushing us in certain ways. It just became important to me to make the case to a larger audience than the large companies that I deal with every day, that this stuff is important and that it needs to be applied for good, and then to teach good people how to do it. Because I'm not worried that the bad guys are going to read my book and learn how to do this. They already know how, you know?
Yeah.
So that was why I wrote the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned like cult leaders, for example. Did you find as you started to talk to people about these ideas that sometimes it was a little too edgy, or people wouldn't get it, or they would push back against it, because that could be, for some people that could be kind of a controversial idea, the idea of taking something that a cult leader uses and using those same strategies yourself, even if you are doing them for, benevolent reasons.
Yeah. I mean, it absolutely did. In fact, I got fired from Forbes, where I wrote a column because I was too controversial. I wrote an article about how you can look at Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam and figure out, how to apply their tactics to good. And I wasn't saying to be like Louis Farrakhan, but they didn't like that, so they fired me. So yeah, I get that all the time. In fact, just a very like a far left. And I won't go into my political beliefs, but they're not far anything. But a far left group found out the American Marketing Association was having me speak, and they said, after all these years of having a hype artist in office, it's a disgrace that you would put this out there. So, I get it all the time. But at the same time, I feel like works of art or businesses or anything really that's created that everyone just kind of says, yeah, it's nice, doesn't really make a huge impact on the world, and stuff that people either really love or really hate, I'm more attracted to. So
right. So you like the fact that it's getting people worked up, get people that are actually paying attention to it.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, partially it's good when people get worked up from a hype perspective, but also I just feel that, I don't know what your tastes are in music and books and this and that, but for me, the music and books that always appeal to me is stuff that other people heard and were like, this is awful. And other people heard and were like, this changed my life. The stuff I don't like is Celine Dion, which is kind of like you're doing the ironing, and it's like, hey, yeah, it's nice.
Right.
You know?
So let me ask you about, it seems like it's easier if you have something that can get people riled up. The ideas that are coming to mind, or examples that are coming to mind, are from politics, which I don't want to get into, but that's been top of mind because we're recording this in November 2020, and it's been front and center. Even with the pandemic that's been happening, that some of the more controversial things have gotten attention. But what if you have a company and it's boring? What if you have a company and it doesn't get people worked up? You say that in the book you can create a community of acolytes to further your cause. Well, how do you leverage that if what you do is IT services, or what you do is HR or something, or you're practicing law or something not that sexy, or not doesn't get people worked up?
It's a really good question, because I think a lot of times when people, I've chosen the word hype, which is a flamboyant term. I talk about picking fights. I speak in this way, and you think to yourself, well, that's really great if you're in professional wrestling, or if you're the Sex Pistols, who I mentioned before, but IT services, HR, how can I use that? Well, whatever corner of the world you're in, there are norms. There are ways that it's done. We do things this way. Right?
When we're promoting a band, we don't put up signs that say that the main singer is dead.
Well, okay. But I guess what I'm saying is that, so we were speaking before, this, and I was talking a little bit about how I'm exploring a few ideas. And one of the many things I'm exploring right now is online courses. Now, to most people who aren't in our corner of the business world, that is a very boring thing. The idea of online personal betterment or online marketing courses, right? And I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. We'll see. And you said to me, I'd be really careful about online courses. And we kind of left it at that. Now, that's a contrarian point of view. Everyone is out there right now saying online courses are the future. The old way of education is bad. You need a scalable business. And if you hear that and say to yourself, you know what? I don't agree. This seems to be gospel lately, and I just simply don't agree. And you go out with that message. That's contrarianism. A great example is a boring industry. The company 37 Signals. It's project management software, basically.
Basecamp, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's a very boring field, project management software. I mean, right? But they came out and they basically said, listen, more is worse, less is better. And they wrote a book about it, and they made it their philosophy. More is worse in every way. Complicating things is worse than in every way. Working harder for no reason is worse. And they had a reason to do that, because Basecamp is a hyper simple project management solution. And before them, it was gospel in that industry that the more functionality you had, the better. That was just a given. And they took that on. So I really think that human beings are human beings. And it almost doesn't matter how hype is not the same as flamboyance. It's about how do human beings react to stimuli in groups.
Yeah, and one of the ways to get attention is by being a contrarian. It's funny you mentioned that, because that is a word that we have used over and over again this past year to describe ourselves, our company, Rise 25, because we say when in what we do with podcasting, we say it's not about the downloads, it's not about the subscribers, which is what most people are talking about. For us, it's about the relationships, it's about the people,
100%.
You and I having a conversation, meeting a great person, helping one another, scratching one another's back, But you write about a number of different individuals in the book, from Spartan Race founder Joe DeSena to Alice Cooper's manager, Gary Vaynerchuk, who I've had on the podcast a while back. Talk to me about how some of them are they contrarians as well? Give me some examples with them.
Well, I mean, again, in the massively long subtitle, it says 12 indispensable success secrets for a reason. Because what I did was I did a whole lot of research for this book, more than I thought I would do. And I read countless biographies and looked at all kinds of crowd psychology stuff and interviewed people. And I found that in this wide swath of people, everyone from Joe DeSena, who does Spartan Race, which is an extremely legitimate business, to the founder of the Moonies, you can boil all of this stuff down, not into one principle, but into 12 strategies. And it can all, and it's just because our brains respond to those 12 kind of dynamics. One of them is I call it make war, not love, but that's about being contrarian. But there are other ones too. So the example I use Joe DeSena to illustrate is packaging. There's a quote from these guys, Elliot Aronson and Anthony Pretkonis. They're these really legendary academic students of propaganda. They're professors who really got to the bottom of propaganda. And they say the essence of, I'll probably misquote this, but the essence of great propaganda is a well-designed package. So Gary DeSena basically, he has a long story where he was in finance and all kinds of stuff, but he eventually turned his life around by eating very healthily and by exercising in a very intense way. And he felt that other people needed to do this. So he created a company called Peak, invested a lot of money in it and a lot of time, and it bombed. I mean, it was a great product or service. I mean, these really great races, it made you healthier, but it bombed. And so he kind of was just like, hey, be peak performance, right? I mean, he was just telling you how it was. And then I think he might have seen the movie 300 about the Spartans. And he thought to himself, well, now that's something. Who doesn't want to be a Spartan? Who doesn't want to be a disciplined, strong, character, especially in our nerf wrapped world, which has changed. We're not as nerf, we're not as cushioned as we used to be.
But certainly at the time that he launched it, probably very different from any other endurance race out there.
Right. So he basically, everything was filtered through the Spartan lens. They even went to Sparta. This guy, he packages himself this way. This guy, I interviewed him. He walked into our meeting with a rock, a giant mini boulder on a chain that was from Sparta. He could have been carrying a backpack with some high-tech weights. I mean, I'm telling you, this guy had a rock and he was carrying it around New York City. That's packaging. You know what I mean? It's that what is the core of what you are? And it must run through everything. It's not just, hey, my website is really nice looking, and I have great web copy, but everything else is incongruous with that. It is packaging. That filter can change everything. And Spartan Race is huge. He made that change. Same product, different packaging, and they're just so successful.
That's great. Give me some of the other arguments of the 12 points and the strategies in the book.
Yeah, I mean, one is really embracing theatricality, and this is one that's kind of similar, that easily brings up your other point about what if I'm in IT or whatever, right? So there are a lot of obvious theatrical characters who are hype artists, right? And they're obviously the people in entertainment, but look at Amway, right? I mean, what I find so interesting about Amway is that Amway is a company that is so successful that they have a sports arena named after them. And I cannot name any of their products. I can now because I did the research for this book, but I mean, they have detergents. Everyone knows Tide. What is Amway's detergent, right? They have a mouth spray. They're not Banaka. And the products might be good. I have no clue. I've never used them. What makes them so wonderful is that they focus on their salespeople and getting them so energized. And the way they do that is with theatricality. If you go to an Amway rally, it's like going to a mega church rally or going to a rock concert. There's lights, there's music. They have people positioned down the aisles to make you stand up at the right time. People get swept into this sort of transcendence. Now, are you going to do that? Are you going to create a big event like that? Maybe not, probably not. But people forget about staging. We're all on Zoom now, right? Yeah. And we just, people are either, they give the minimum effort, they put their bookshelf in the back because I guess that makes them look smart, even though,
right.
Okay.
Right.
Or they put some weird, virtual background that kind of comes in and comes out.
Right.
Well, it's not enough to just put cool stuff in the background. What does it say about you? What's your message? What's your image? What's your Spartan race? You should be thinking about your staging all the time. Your clothing is a prop. Your what you put around you is a prop, right? So that's another one. There's one that I call milk before meat. If you're introducing a very new concept, a concept that's really hard for people to digest. People don't like big changes. That's very scary. So you want to come in with a small change that is easy for them to accept and then kind of grow it and grow it and grow it. And you see that a lot with religions. It's a religious phrase. I mean, Scientology, by all accounts, their belief for people who are really in the church is that we were created by aliens who live on the lip of a volcano and all this stuff. And I don't want to remark on whether I agree with that or not, but what I will say is that it is very unusual compared to other world religions. But that's not how they get people in. They get you in with this like positive thinking message. It doesn't even seem like a religion. It seems like a Tony Robbins seminar or it's or Myers-Briggs. I mean, they have these e-meters and quizzes you fill out. It's all about being your best self, right? I mean, there are so many. Another one is become a magus. So what that means is you need to basically create this character for yourself where you dial up your strengths, downplay your weaknesses, and turn your weaknesses into strengths. So a good example of that is Andy Warhol. He was a guy who, when he was growing up in the 30s and 40s, he was the opposite of what the ideal man of that time should be. He was gay, which was a criminal act at the time, and obviously gay. He was very skinny. He was balding. He had acne, and he turned every one of those things into a strength. He turned his shyness into this cool, laconic attitude that everyone wanted to get his approval. He was balding, so he just went all out and got a silver wig that everyone knew was a wig, that everyone knew was artificial, So how do you turn your weaknesses into strengths and be consistent with that? So yeah, it's this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I just did an interview with David Rendell, who's known as his thing is Freak Factor, and he's I want to say like 6'8" or something. He wears pink everything, pink, glasses. He's got a pink tattoos, all this kind of stuff. And
perfect.
The whole message is about to embrace, what's different about you and to embrace your weaknesses. Kind of the same thing as you're saying. Another thing.
However, I do want to say that doesn't mean that if you're not the all pink guy, that you should be all pink. I mean, right. Thomas Edison was this grouchy guy who didn't really like people. So he constantly told people about how hard he was working. Now, he did work hard, but he upplayed that like crazy because he didn't want to interact. He wanted to be in his lab. So he would plant stories in the press around how he was working around the clock and his clothing was rumpled and this and that. So it doesn't have to be flamboyance,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What about, you also write about creating an atmosphere of curiosity and intrigue. So give me some examples of ways and you can do that.
Yeah, I think that's as much a reaction to where we've gone and where I think people miss the plot. It's so easy. You hear so much about calls to action now, right? That's the new thing, that everything you do must have a call to action. Like, what's the point of putting up a flyer or putting up an ad if it doesn't say, click here and sign up to my email list, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you even do some kind of print campaign, you would always have www.blablabla.com.
Yeah.
And, I'm just thinking about these lowercase m marketing campaigns of the past that didn't do that. And it built a lot of intrigue. So to give you an example, in the 70s in New York, in the mid 70s, in the Lower East Side of New York, these posters kept appearing that said punk is coming. Now, this was before there was no musical genre called punk. In fact, a punk was kind of like when you say someone's a punk, like a dirty, rotten scoundrel, right? And it's prison slang, and it means something even worse than that if you trace back the roots. And people would see punk is coming in this really cool font. And no one knew what that was. It was this weird term, punk is coming. What does that mean? And it was just everywhere you went. And then eventually it came out that it was a magazine. And it was the magazine that covered what would become the punk scene. And the thing blew up along that audience. If that would have had www.punkmagazine.com on the bottom, where you could go read about the magazine, that would have killed it.
Yeah.
Now, eventually you have to do the content, but everyone, that's the thing. So that's very important to.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Create that curiosity, which I think a lot of people they're resistant to do that because they want people to go click on their thing or access their thing. Whatever. I want to ask you, we're running a little short on time, but I want to ask you, we're recording this in late November, 2020. Your book is coming out in January of 2021. Through a kind of a quirk of fate and history, we've been governed for the last 4 years, without getting into too much politics, but by someone who would be considered kind of a hypey type, Trump, I'm talking about, of course, a showman, right? And we just had this election where the electorate went for kind of the more plain vanilla type of thing. So do you think there could be a reaction backwards to something more boring, or do you think that these things that you write about are going to continue to be relevant going forward?
So if I'm getting too political, let me know, but we're talking about politics, right?
Well, considering I worked in the White House, I'm probably okay with it.
We are in the worst crisis in 80 years, and it's just flat out being handled terribly. Like, there's no arguing. There's been zero leadership. We're the richest country in the world. We have the highest death rate. There's an economic crisis. There was, the guy in charge basically said that in the states that I'm winning, we should keep voting, and in the other states, we should stop. So wacky stuff. There have been 26 Watergates since this president began, and he still almost won.
Yep.
Like, after Carter, Reagan won like 46 states.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there were gas lines. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. Right. So I guess maybe the message is that, it kind of gets back to what you were saying originally, is that you have written down these principles because you want to give them to the good guys. You want to give it to people who've got great missions who just haven't figured out the formula yet so that they can use it for good.
Without giving away my politics, I saw that guy up there, and let's just say he's not my candidate. And I saw him saying things that just didn't make a lot of sense. I don't mean his policies, but that any other politician could not have gotten away with, because they just weren't true. And the level of dedication that people had toward him, it made me really driven to teach people who actually are telling the truth and have good stuff to sell these tactics, because I think it's damaging.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up with the two questions I enjoy asking. So number one, I'm a big fan of gratitude. So looking around at peers, looking at other professionals in your industry who are doing similar things to you, who do you respect? Who you admire?
Yeah, there are a few. I'll have to start with Michael Roderick. I mean, the guy who introduced us, not only is he the most generous person possibly on earth, I just had a conversation with him the other day where he helped me solve a big, business problem just out of the goodness of his heart. So he's one, and his new referable brand idea is really quite good. And I'm really curious to see. I think that's going to blow up. Another one is Dory Clark.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she has become a friend. There are a lot of business writers who have a book where it could really be a pamphlet. You know what I mean? I'll read it and I'll be like, there's some good ideas in here, but it doesn't really change the way I do business. Every time I read one of her books or see one of her talks or have a conversation with her, I come away with new ideas that actually either make me money or, me being on this podcast with you, I managed to get myself booked on countless podcasts, and it's doing wonders for my visibility. And that idea came from Dory Clark, because her idea was that a podcast is someone is proactively downloading the episode and listening deeply. That's more of a reader than someone watching a TV show or even seeing you in a bookstore. So
Sure.
I think she's great. She's so full of good ideas.
Yeah, she's great. I agree. All right, and then looking backwards, even further, even back to your childhood, as far back as you like, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys. You're receiving an award for lifetime achievement. So, who from your lifetime do you thank? Who are the mentors? Who are the friends? Who are the business partners? Who are the peers? Who are the people that you would acknowledge in your remarks?
I mean, obviously there are so many, but for the purposes of this, I said in the beginning that I'm driven first and foremost by my early desire to be a writer. I came up with my agency work because of my desire to sell my writing. My writing fuels, the work we do for clients. I've written this book. And I had a lot of great teachers who really believed in me and saw whatever talent I have and nurtured it. I mean, even as far as first grade, I went to an interesting school where we had a creative writing special, and once a week, and I would write these kind of funny stories, and people liked them a lot, and I made people laugh. And that I had a teacher, Mrs. Lewis, who passed away recently, but she really encouraged me, Mrs. Rosenfeld. So yeah, I would say my English and Mrs. Dorn. I mean, yeah, I just had some really good, encouraging writing teachers. English teachers.
All right, Michael, where can people go to learn more about you and learn more about the book?
Well, yeah, I mean, the book, it's if there's a bookstore open near you and they're carrying books, certainly go there first. But, all the online outlets, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of those places. Yeah, I mean, my company is called MicroFame Media. So it's microfamemedia.com. Oh, I should also say there is another Michael Schein out there who is this kind of like thriller writer or something. So I have recently become Michael F. Schein. So my website is Michael F. Schein, Schein, like David Foster Wallace. That's my new moniker.
Very good. Very good. Well, there's another John Corcoran out there who's the teacher who couldn't read. So I've had that kind of albatross around my neck for many years. So I can relate. Well, Michael, this has been great. Thanks so much. And
thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.